Hello and welcome back to another Decktech. We're doing Thrumming Dynamo. I know last time in the last video that it sounded like I was saying Thran Dynamo. I stuttered. I apologize. I don't know if anybody noticed, but sometimes I stutter. So this week, this deck is very interesting. It has a lot of sequencing because of the way that Proliferate works. And it involves us having to choose a lot of different things, like do we prioritize our mana, do we prioritize our creatures, do we prioritize this or that, our resilience or our aggression, and we have to make a lot of choices. And of course, for this week, it is competitive once again, hence Proliferate, hence the blue. Alright, let's get right into this deck. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we are built kind of around the idea of Proliferate, and we kind of want to make it good, but we don't want to be completely reliant on Proliferate and put a bunch of cards that don't necessarily work great together into a deck and just force it to try to be good. It would be better if each of the cards can stand on their own, but when they are together, which they usually are, they get a lot better individually. Like there's synergy between them. So we're gonna start with our Proliferate cards. We have 12 of them. We have one Spreading Sickness, destroy target creature, then Proliferate. A little expensive, but we need a hard removal spell sometimes for any larger creatures or anything oddly specific that's like not supposed to, like we don't normally see and doesn't normally exist. And then we have Steady Progress. Steady Progress says draw a card and Proliferate. It's 2 and a blue. We've seen this card before, it's pretty good. We also have our 4 Thrumming Birds. 1/1 flyer. Proliferate when it deals damage to a player. We saw it last video. If you haven't seen that video, go back and check that video. And we also have the 3 Grim Afflictions. Now Grim Affliction is 2 and a black, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature and then Proliferate. So basically we can double up that counter, so target creature really gets 2 -1/-1 counters. And since we're gonna Proliferate a couple more times, that creature is gonna get several -1/-1 counters. The most important one of these that are here is the Thrumming Bird, because it can repeatedly do it and it does actually give us a ton of value for each time that it hits. And it's free. That Proliferate, after it gets through, and we get that is free value that we're getting from this 1/1 flyer. Alright, we got plenty more creatures where that came from. We have a lot of artifact creatures, and Arcbound is actually something that I really liked, and I saw had a lot of good synergy with this. So we have several Arcbound creatures and a lot of artifact creatures. And if you don't know about the Arcbound series of creatures, they all have modular, so when that creature dies, you get to put its +1/+1 counters onto another artifact creature. And with Proliferate, those counters can be, you can increase them by 1 every time that you Proliferate across this list of other things. So when you have like 5 creatures, add a +1/+1 counter onto each one that already has a +1/+1 counter is pretty good. We're gonna start with Arcbound Worker, a 4 of, Arcbound Stinger, another 4 of. We have some Vault Scourges, 1/1 flying lifelink. We also have Arcbound Wanderer, a 3 of. Arcbound Wanderer is very large. He's the only creature with modular and Sunburst. So for each color of mana that you pay to cast him, he gets a +1/+1 counter. He enters with one of those +1/+1 counters, and when he dies, he gets to move all those counters around. So it's this huge fatty, and that may not seem very good. 6 mana for a 5/5, you can do better, but keep in mind, he has synergy with all these other cards, and he's not bad. 6 mana, we do have a lot of extra mana sometimes, so 6 mana for a 5/5 is not bad. A lot of times he comes out as a 4/4, but it's pretty good. He's more than scary enough to hold his own. Plus the ability to just like put him on defense. If he dies, put all the +1/+1 counters onto Vault Scourge, swing with a flying lifelink, 5/5, pretty decent. And we also have 2 Dimir House Guards. which is actually just a surprisingly good card in this deck. It has Transmute, and it's a 4 mana card, so you can discard it and search your library for any card with 4 mana. Oh, I'm sorry, convert a mana cost to 4. And it's a 2/3, so it's a decent blocker and a great attacker because it's Fear. Also, you can sacrifice a creature and regenerate it. And with Modular, we can do this sneaky thing where if a creature would die from combat damage and we wouldn't end up like getting through with the damage, but there is an unblocked creature that is getting through, maybe overhead, like our Archon Stinger, we can end up sacrificing the Wanderer, we can end up sacrificing a worker or something, and put its +1/+1 counters on that and regenerate our Dimir House card. So he's a creature when we need it, that is great on defense, great as attacking, also has synergy with the other creatures, or it can become one of our 4-drops. Now our 4-drops, I'll get right into those because they support our creatures very well. Well, one of them does, the other one does not, does the opposite to our opponent's creatures. We have Opaline Bracers. Opaline Bracers is a 4 mana cost equipment card, has Sunburst. For each color of mana that you pay to cast this, it comes on with 1 charge counter. So it usually comes on with 3 charge counters. Sometimes we get lucky and we can get a 4th one on there. And it has equipped for 2, so you can attach it to a creature. And that creature gets +X/+X, where X is the number of charge counters on this. We have our rated arrows. It comes on with 3 arrowhead counters on it, and then you can tap it, put a -1/-1 counter onto a creature, typically your opponent's, and with our proliferate ability, we can make those even larger. The arrowhead counters are built back up onto this, so it actually does significantly more work, but we gotta be careful. If it runs out of counters, along with anything else in this deck, if it runs out of counters, it cannot be used anymore. You can't proliferate from 0. You can't add another counter where 1 does not exist. And this one, specifically, if there are no counters on it at the beginning of the upkeep, you have to sacrifice it. Then we have 4 Thoughtcast. Thoughtcast, I was deciding between this and another cantrip, but I didn't feel like any of the cantrips were quite as good as just playing a Thoughtcast. Just a lot of times we can play it for 1 or 2 mana and draw 2 cards. Now let's talk about our mana base. Our mana base is a little weird, but it does ramp us very fast, and because of Proliferate, we can get around a lot of the negative sides of it. We have 4 Peat Bog, 4 Saprazen Ports, and we have 4 Pentad Prisms. All of them rely on counters, and when they run out, they're usually useless, but if we can proliferate them fast enough and slow our game down until we start proliferating, then we can use them to their fullest benefit, tapping the 2 lands for 2 mana every single time. Very good. No downside, and it's colored mana too. It actually works out to be better than Ancient Tomb, while Pentad Prism fixes our mana, helps us play into Sunburst a little bit better, and it generates us mana every time that we proliferate, so we're almost reducing the cost of our proliferate cards, which all are more expensive than their non-proliferate variations. Now for the rest of the mana base, we have 4 Seed of the Synod for affinities. We have 2 Vault of Whispers. Then the remaining 4 land are 2 Dismal Backwaters and 2 Swiftwater Cliffs. But that's not the only reason for the red. We also have in our sideboard some red cards. So let's get right into our sideboard very quickly. In our sideboard, surprise, we have more proliferate stuff. We have 1 extra copy of Serrated Arrows and 3 Volt Charges. Then we have 4 Aether Ethereas. It's part of our transitional piece of our sideboard. Full play set of them. It's a 1/3 for 1 and a blue. Sounds a lot like Augur Bolas. And you can tap it and use up an energy, and you can scry. Then we have our Necrogen Sensors. 3 mana for an artifact. Comes into play with 3 charge counters on it. You can tap it, remove a counter, and target player loses 2 life. We have 2 Fester Creeps. 1 in a black. Comes into play with a +1/+1 counter. It's a 0/0, and you can pay 1 in a black, remove a +1/+1 counter. All creatures other than it get -1/-1 until end of turn. That's not a counter. However, the +1/+1 is, and this is great for elves. And if we hold back the elven wave of awfulness for a turn, and we get our chance to proliferate once with this thing, wipe out a bunch of elves, and then the next turn we can keep adding another counter, remove another counter turns later, killing all the elves again, and we can almost lock them out of the game just with these 2 cards. Sure, it doesn't necessarily get us as much value as serrated arrows over time, but it is much faster. And then to polish it off, one of my favorite sideboard cards out of all of them is Relic of Progenitus. 1 mana, tap it, target player removes cards from his or her graveyard, pay 1, sacrifice it, exile all the cards from all the graveyards, and draw a card. Now, if you have any questions about this deck, please go down to the video description below, check this deck out on tapped.net, and go to the comments. I'll see the comment that is left, and I'll try to respond to it by the end of the week or within a few days. Alright, that's it for this deck tech. Next week we have Whiteless Energy. We're still going to be doing a little bit of proliferating because I'm still a little high on proliferate. And next week it's going to be kind of like you're in Standard again. Aether Vault Standard with the whole Tumblr package energy thing going on. And yeah, we can generate tokens, yeah, we can make our guys bigger. And it's going to be fairly similar to this deck, but it's going to have a different shell and play very differently. So come on in for that face touch. Oh, and you know what? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.